My name is Anna, and I'm 31, though the weight of the past 24 hours makes me feel decades older. I'm a mother, a widow now, though that word still feels foreign, like a label that belongs to someone else. My daughter, Sophie, is 3, with eyes so clear they seem to hold the world's secrets and a heart so sensitive I fear it might break under the grief we're both drowning in. I've lived in this small village all my life, where everyone knows your name and your sorrows. I'm a seamstress, or I was, before the world tilted and left me grasping for meaning. My hands, once steady with needle and thread, now tremble as I sit here, staring at the unthinkable. The air in St. Michael's Church is thick, heavy with the scent of lilies and polished wood, mingling with the raw ache of loss. Pews creak under the weight of mourners, their whispers weaving into a low, mournful hum, broken by stifled sobs. Church's ancient bell tolls, each clang sinking into my bones, marking the finality of a life stolen too soon. I sit in the front row, my hands knotted in my lap, staring at the oak coffin that holds David, my David, who just yesterday kissed my forehead and promised to be home for dinner. Now he lies silent, his vibrant spirit extinguished without warning, without reason. Sophie clings to my arm, her tiny fingers digging into my sleeve. Her wide, crystal-clear eyes, so like her father's, flicker between the coffin and my face, searching for answers I can't give. Priest's voice drones on, reciting prayers meant to soothe, but they feel empty, unable to pierce the fog of disbelief that surrounds me. David was 32, strong, the kind of man who could carry Sophie on his shoulders for hours without tiring. He was healthy, no, more than healthy. He was alive, laughing, planning our future just hours before. His voice echoes in my mind. "I'll see you tonight, Anna. Love you." Then came the call in the dead of night, a stranger's voice saying my husband was gone. A heart attack, they claimed, but it doesn't add up. David ran marathons, ate well, lived well. My mind churns, sifting through the past week for signs I missed. The villagers behind us whisper, their faces a mix of pity and unease. "Too young," someone murmurs. It's not right. I want to scream that I know it's wrong, that something is terribly off. Sophie's soft whimper pulls me back. "Where's Daddy?" she asked this morning. I lied, saying he's watching over us, because the truth is too heavy for her fragile heart. As the organ plays its somber hymn, I stare at the coffin, its polished surface reflecting flickering candlelight. Beneath my grief, a spark of suspicion grows. I need answers for me, for Sophie. Church seemed to close in around me, the weight of grief and unanswered questions pressing against my chest. Sophie, my sweet 3-year-old, squirmed in my arms, her small body trembling with sobs that tore at my heart. Her face, flushed red from crying, was streaked with tears, and her clear, wide eyes were fixed on the oak coffin that held David. "Daddy's stuck," she wailed, her tiny hand pointing frantically at the polished wood. "He's calling me." Her voice, high and desperate, pierced the somber hum of the organ and the muted whispers of the mourners. I pulled her closer, stroking her chestnut curls, whispering, "Shush, sweetheart, Daddy's at peace," but the words felt like ash in my mouth. I didn't believe them any more than she did. Sophie's gaze darted past the coffin, locking onto a shadowed corner of the church where the candlelight barely reached. Her eyes widened, her body stiffening as if she saw something or someone lurking in the darkness. "He's there," she whimpered, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. My skin prickled, but when I followed her gaze, I saw nothing but the cold stone wall. I tried to soothe her, rocking her gently, but her distress was a knife twisting in my gut. Sophie had always been sensitive, noticing things others missed, a bird's nest hidden in the trees, the faintest shift in my mood. But this was different. Her fear felt tangible, like a warning I couldn't yet decipher. The mourners' whispers grew louder, their words slithering through the pews like a cold wind. "Such a tragedy," one said. "A heart attack at his age? It's not natural." Another voice, lower, muttered, "Could be a curse. The old mill, it's got a history." The old mill. David had been working there lately, helping repair its ancient machinery. I dismissed the village's superstitions before, but now, with Sophie's cries and the weight of David's unexplained death, doubt crept in. Mrs. Agnes, the village's unofficial historian, leaned toward me, her frail hand gripping my arm. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, gleamed with something between pity and knowing. "Children see things, Anna," she whispered, her voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. "Things we've trained ourselves to ignore. Don't dismiss her." I shivered, her words sinking into me like a stone. I wanted to scoff, to cling to reason. David's death was a medical anomaly, nothing more. But Sophie's trembling, her insistence that David was calling her, gnawed at my certainty. What if she was right? What if someone had taken him from us? The thought was absurd, yet it rooted itself in my mind, fed by the villagers' murmurs and the chilling emptiness of that shadowed corner. The priest's voice faltered as Sophie's cries grew louder, drawing every eye in the church. I felt exposed, raw, as if their pity and curiosity were peeling back my skin. "Let's step outside," I murmured to Sophie, carrying her toward the heavy wooden doors. Cold air hit us as we emerged into the churchyard, the bell's toll fading behind us. Sophie clung to me, her sobs quieting, but her eyes still darted toward the church, as if whatever she'd seen had followed us. I set her down on a stone bench, kneeling before her. "What did you see, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She hesitated, then pointed back toward the church. "A shadow," she whispered. "It was with Daddy." My heart stuttered. A shadow? My rational mind screamed that it was grief, imagination, a child's fear twisting reality. But Mrs. Agnes's words echoed, "Children see things." I looked back at the church, its spire looming against the gray sky. The villagers' whispers about curses, the mill, and David's sudden death swirled in my mind. Something was wrong, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just grief. It was the beginning of a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. For Sophie's sake, I had to. The church was a crucible of grief and fear, and Sophie's scream shattered the fragile calm like glass. "Daddy's crying. He's calling Mommy." Her voice, raw and piercing, echoed off the stone walls, silencing the mourners' whispers and halting the priest mid-prayer. Every head turned, eyes wide, fixed on my 3-year-old daughter, her tiny frame trembling in my arms. Her clear, tear-streaked eyes were locked on the oak coffin, as if she could see through its polished surface to someone inside. My heart pounded, torn between comforting her and the chilling possibility that she was right. Sophie had always been sensitive, but this wasn't a child's imagination. Her words carried a weight that made the air feel heavier, thicker, as if the church itself was holding its breath. Before I could respond, the heavy wooden door of St. Michael's creaked open, the sound grating against the silence. James, David's cousin, stepped inside, his boots clicking on the stone floor. His face was a mask of practiced sorrow, but his eyes, cold, calculating, betrayed him. He approached me, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort but feeling like a claw. "Anna, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. But his lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a chill ran through me. I'd never trusted James. His charm was too polished, his motives always murky. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "David left behind some debts, you know. Quite a bit, actually. You should consider selling the house to settle things." His words hit like a slap. Debts? David had been meticulous with our finances, always planning for Sophie's future. Why was James bringing this up now, in the middle of my husband's funeral? My shock must have shown because his smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something, nervousness perhaps? Sophie's voice cut through again. "Daddy's stuck," she cried, pointing at the coffin, her small body shaking. I followed her gaze, my stomach twisting as I noticed James's reaction. His eyes darted to the coffin, and for a split second, panic flashed across his face. It was gone as quickly as it came, but I saw it, a crack in his facade. My suspicion, already smoldering, flared. What did he know? Why did Sophie's words unsettle him so much? Before I could press him, a sound, low, resonant, impossible, erupted from the coffin. Thump. The noise was unmistakable, like a fist striking wood from within. Church fell silent, every breath held, every eye locked on the coffin. Then it came again. Thump. Thump. Deliberate, urgent, growing louder. My blood turned to ice, my arms tightening around Sophie as she whimpered. "He's calling us." James lurched forward, his voice sharp. "No one opens that coffin," he shouted, his composure unraveling. "It's just the wind settling wood, that's all." But his words trembled, and sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening in the dim candlelight. The mourners shifted uneasily, their whispers rising into a frantic hum. "What's happening?" someone cried. "It's not possible," another hissed. I wanted to scream that it wasn't possible either. David was gone, wasn't he? But the thumping continued, relentless, each strike a hammer against my sanity. My mind raced, torn between reason and the impossible. Was David alive? Or was something else at play, something darker? Then, without warning, the church's lights flickered, the chandeliers swaying faintly as if caught in a draft. Candles on the altar, dozens of them, burning steadily moments ago, snuffed out all at once, plunging the sanctuary into near darkness. Gasps filled the air, followed by a collective shudder as a cold, unnatural wind swept through the church. Carried a damp, musty odor like earth disturbed from a crypt, chilling my skin and raising goosebumps. Sophie buried her face in my chest, sobbing, "It's the shadow, Mommy!" The shadow, she'd mentioned it before, in the churchyard. My eyes strained against the gloom, searching for the corner she'd pointed to earlier, but the darkness was too thick, swallowing everything. Panic erupted. Mourners stumbled from the pews, their footsteps chaotic as they rushed toward the heavy wooden doors. "Let us out," a woman screamed, her voice shrill. But when they reached the doors, they wouldn't budge. Someone rattled the handles, pounding frantically, but the doors held fast, as if sealed by an unseen force. "They're locked," a man shouted, his voice cracking. Crowd pressed forward, their fear palpable, a living thing that fed the growing dread in my chest. The thumping from the coffin grew louder, more insistent, now accompanied by a faint, eerie whisper, a sound that wasn't quite human, weaving through Sophie's soft cries. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, curling around us like smoke. Words formed, indistinct but chilling. "Find me, Anna." My knees buckled, and I clutched Sophie tighter, her warmth the only thing anchoring me. Was it David's voice? It sounded like him, yet distorted, as if filtered through something ancient and wrong. The villagers' panic intensified, some praying, others weeping, their voices blending with the whispers into a cacophony of terror. James stood frozen, his eyes wide, his earlier bravado gone. "This is nonsense," he barked, but his voice shook and he backed away from the coffin, his hands trembling. I stared at him, my suspicion hardening into certainty. He knew something about David's death, about the debts, about whatever was happening now. Why else would he be so desperate to keep that coffin closed? I forced myself to stand, Sophie in my arms, and took a step toward the coffin. The thumping stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. The whispers lingered, faint but persistent, urging me forward. "Anna, don't," James snapped, lunging to block my path. His hand grabbed my wrist, his grip too tight, his eyes wild. "You don't understand what you're doing," he hissed. But I yanked free, my fear giving way to a fierce determination. David was in there, alive or otherwise, I needed to know. For Sophie, for me, for the truth. The darkness seemed to pulse, the air growing colder, thicker. The whispers grew louder, now joined by a low, guttural hum that seemed to rise from the stone floor itself. The villagers' screams faded into the background as I approached the coffin, my heart thundering. Sophie clung to me, her small voice barely audible. "Daddy's scared, Mommy." I reached out, my fingers brushing the coffin's cold surface, and the whispers stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, then a single deafening thump shook the coffin, vibrating through my hand. I froze, my breath caught as the realization hit. Whatever was inside wasn't just David. Something else was with him, and it wasn't letting us go. Church was a pressure cooker of fear and chaos, the air thick with the stench of extinguished candles and the villagers' mounting panic. Coffin's relentless thumping pounded in my ears, each strike a desperate plea I couldn't ignore. Sophie's small body trembled in my arms, her voice a broken whisper. "Daddy's crying!" Before I could move, the church doors burst open with a groan, and William, David's best friend, stumbled inside, his face flushed, chest heaving. His eyes locked on mine, wild with urgency. "Anna," he gasped, pushing through the crowd. "David told me something before he died. James was pressuring him to sell your family's house, the old one, passed down for generations. David refused, said he'd never give it up. Then the accident happened." His words sliced through me, sharp and cold, connecting dots I hadn't dared to see. James, with his fake tears and talk of debts, was at the heart of this. Sophie's scream cut through again. "Daddy's crying." The thumping from the coffin grew frantic, a violent rhythm that shook the wooden lid. My heart lurched, and I surged toward the coffin, Sophie still in my arms. I had to know, alive or not, David was calling us. But James lunged, his hand cracking across my face with a force that sent me sprawling to the stone floor. Pain exploded in my cheek, and warm blood trickled from my lip. Sophie wailed, clinging to me as the villagers erupted in outrage, their shouts filling the church. William roared, charging at James and slamming a fist into his jaw. James crumpled to the floor, his polished facade shattered, blood seeping from his split lip. "Enough!" Father Michael's voice boomed, the elderly priest stepping forward, his robe swaying. His usually calm eyes were sharp with authority. "This is a house of God, stop this now." But the thumping didn't stop, each beat louder, more desperate, as if David was clawing to escape. Sophie's whisper broke my heart. "Daddy's scared, Mommy." I staggered to my feet, blood staining my chin, and met Father Michael's gaze. "I have to know the truth," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. The villagers fell silent, their fear hanging heavy, waiting for what came next. Before the priest could respond, the doors flew open again, and Thomas, the village's forensic doctor, burst in, his coat flapping, face pale. "Don't open that coffin," he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. Crowd froze, and even the thumping seemed to pause, as if the church itself was listening. "The death certificate, it's wrong," Thomas panted, holding up a crumpled paper. "It's signed by a Dr. Harrow, but there's no such doctor in the county. No one verified David's death, no autopsy, nothing." My knees buckled, and I clutched Sophie tighter. "Not dead?" The words didn't make sense, yet they ignited a spark of impossible hope. James scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of panic. "You're lying," he spat, but his voice shook, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. The villagers turned on him, their murmurs growing hostile. William grabbed his collar, snarling, "What did you do?" James's resolve cracked, and he stumbled back, hands raised. I didn't mean to kill him," he stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "I put something in his drink just to scare him, make him sign over the house. He was supposed to wake up. But he had a reaction, went into a coma. I paid someone to forge the papers, thought he was gone." His confession hung in the air, a poison that silenced the church. Sophie's soft sob broke the stillness. "Daddy's scared," she whispered again, and the thumping resumed, slower now but unmistakable. My heart raced. Was David alive, trapped in that coffin? Or was something else at play, something tied to the whispers, the shadows Sophie saw? I turned to Father Michael, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Open the coffin. Now." Church was a cauldron of chaos. the air thick with fear and the echo of the coffin's relentless thumping. James's screams, shrill, desperate, cut through the din as he lunged toward us. "Don't open it. You'll ruin everything," he shrieked, but William shoved him back, pinning him against a pew. Father Michael, his face grim but resolute, nodded to me. "Anna, we need to know," he said, his voice steady despite the madness around us. My hands trembled as I gripped the coffin's edge, Sophie clinging to my skirt, her tear-streaked face turned upward. "Daddy's there," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of hope. With William's help, we heaved against the heavy oak lid, the wood groaning as it resisted. The villagers held their breath, some praying, others frozen in horror as the lid finally gave way. A blast of icy air rushed out, unnatural and biting, carrying a damp, earthy smell that made my stomach churn. It was as if something trapped inside had been set free, and for a moment the church seemed to darken, the shadows deepening. I barely noticed, my eyes were locked on David. He lay there, impossibly alive, his skin ghostly pale, his lips cracked and bloodless. His chest rose faintly, each breath a struggle, but he was alive. "David!" I cried, my voice breaking as I collapsed over him, my hands cradling his cold face. Tears streamed down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable, as I pressed my forehead to his. You're here," I sobbed. Sophie scrambled forward, her small hands reaching for him. "Daddy," she wailed, her voice a mix of joy and fear. David's eyes fluttered, unfocused, but they found us, and a weak, trembling hand reached for Sophie's. The villagers gasped, a collective sound of shock and disbelief. 2 women near the back fainted, their bodies slumping into the pews. Others whispered prayers or curses, their faces pale as they stared at the miracle or nightmare before them. But something else caught my eye, a flicker of movement in the church's shadowed corner where Sophie had pointed earlier. A few villagers cried out, swearing they saw a dark shape, formless, fleeting, glide across the stone wall before vanishing. The air grew colder, the musty scent lingering, and a shiver ran through me. Was it the shadow Sophie had seen? Was it tied to the whispers, the thumping, the unnatural force that had locked us in? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on David, but the unease clung to me like damp cloth. James's scream snapped my attention back. "No! No!" He howled, thrashing against William's grip. His face was a mask of terror, his eyes wild, darting to the coffin as if he saw something we couldn't. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he babbled, his voice cracking. "I just wanted the house." Confession spilled out, raw and unhinged. I drugged him, thought he'd sign the papers in a panic. But he collapsed, stopped breathing. I thought he was dead. I paid for the certificate, buried him to cover it up. His words were a confession and a plea, but they only fueled the villagers' rage. William tightened his grip, his knuckles white. Church doors burst open again, this time admitting 3 police officers, their boots heavy on the stone floor. "James Harper, you're under arrest," the lead officer barked, cuffs glinting in the dim light. James panicked, wrenching free from William and bolting toward the altar, but his foot caught on a pew. He crashed to the floor, muttering incoherently, words that sounded like a chant or a curse, his eyes fixed on that shadowed corner. "It's not my fault," he whimpered, curling into himself. "It told me to do it." The officers hauled him up, his body limp, his mind seemingly broken. I turned back to David, my hands trembling as I brushed his hair from his face. He was alive, but the shadow, the cold, the whispers, something lingered, watching. Sophie clung to us both, her small voice steady now. "Daddy's safe, Mommy." But was he? Was any of us? The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beep of the monitor tracking David's heartbeat, a sound I'd once feared I'd never hear again. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting a warm glow on David's face, no longer deathly pale but regaining the color of life. He was weak, his body still recovering from the poison James had slipped into his drink and the days spent trapped in that coffin. but his eyes held the same spark I'd fallen in love with. Sophie sat curled on the bed beside him, her tiny hand clutching his, her laughter a melody that filled the room. "Daddy's back," she said, her voice bright, as if the horrors of St. Michael's Church were already fading from her young mind. I stood by the window, watching them, my heart swollen with gratitude and a lingering ache from the nightmare we'd survived. David's recovery was slow but steady. In the hospital, he told me what he remembered, fragments of consciousness in the coffin, trapped in a haze of darkness. He'd heard Sophie's cries, my desperate voice calling his name, and impossibly James's confession as it echoed through the church. "I felt you both pulling me back," he whispered, his hands squeezing mine. "I wasn't ready to leave you." Those words broke me, and I wept, not from grief but from the miracle of having him back. The doctors called it a medical anomaly. David's survival, they said, was a 1 in a million chance, his body somehow resisting the drug's full effect. But I knew better. It was Sophie's intuition, her unshakable belief that her father was still with us, that had guided me to the truth. A month later, justice was served. In the courtroom, James sat hunched, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow stare. The evidence was damning: the forged death certificate, the drug traces found in David's system, and his own frantic confession in the church. The judge's gavel fell, sentencing him to 25 years for attempted murder and fraud. As James was led away in cuffs, he muttered incoherently, still haunted by whatever he'd seen or imagined in that shadowed corner of the church. I felt no pity. He'd tried to bury my husband alive for a house, for greed, and he'd paid the price. Back at our family home, the one David had fought to keep, life began to heal. The old house, with its creaking floors and sunlit rooms, felt alive again. Sophie ran through the garden, her laughter chasing away the ghosts of that terrible day. David, still regaining his strength, sat on the porch, watching her with a smile that held both love and awe. I joined him, our hands entwined, the warmth of his touch grounding me. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. We were whole again, our family stitched back together by love, instinct, and a child's unyielding faith. As I reflect on what happened, I carry lessons that will stay with me forever. First, I've learned that a mother's intuition is a force beyond reason, a compass that can guide you through the darkest storms. When Sophie insisted her father was stuck, I doubted her at first, but her heart saw what my eyes couldn't. That bond, that unspoken knowing, saved David's life. Second, the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of clawing its way to the surface. James thought he could hide his crime in a coffin, but the truth broke free, as relentless as the thumping we heard that day. Third, evil and greed may seem to triumph for a moment, but justice, though slow, is inevitable. James's betrayal cost him everything, proving that no one escapes the consequences of their actions. Beyond these, I've learned 2 more truths that anchor me now. Fourth, the love of a family is an unbreakable shield. It was Sophie's cries, David's fight to survive, and our refusal to let go that brought us through the darkness. No force, not even death's shadow, could sever that bond. Finally, I've learned to listen to the voices others dismiss, especially those of children. Sophie's words, her fear of the shadow, weren't just childish fears. They were warnings, glimpses of a truth adults too often ignore. That shadow in the church, the whispers, the cold, whether real or born of our collective fear, they were part of what pushed me to act. As I watched Sophie chase fireflies in the twilight, her laughter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves, I know these lessons will guide us forward. Life is fragile, but it's also resilient, held together by love, truth, and the courage to face the unknown. We survived because we believed in each other, because a little girl's heart refused to let her father go. And in that, I find hope, not just for us, but for anyone who dares to listen to the quiet truths that whisper in the dark. Thank you for listening. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.